So Jamie, welcome to the show.
Great to be here with you, Will. Great to see you again.
Really good to see you. So we spoke last, probably about 3 years ago now, and you shared your wisdom as you're always great at doing with our audience at the Evolve Network at the time, and we had a really good conversation. I'm really looking forward to sharing the wisdom of Jamie Smart once again, but this time with the global audience of everyone listening to the Make It Happen podcast. So for people that have obviously listening to the show, they've just heard about some of your wonderful achievements and some of the things that you've done. You've written a number of great books, but a lot of your work is focused around clarity. So for people that everyone's heard the term clarity, I use clarity a lot in the work that I do, but you are, I suppose you've created a whole movement around clarity and the certifications and everything that's involved with that. But what is clarity for you, and why is it important?
Well, to me, clarity is a few different things. The first is, a lot of times people will say, oh, you need to get clarity on this. And it's really just about going from kind of being confused or a bit foggy or not to being like, oh, I know what to do. And funnily enough, Will, a lot of times people, I do talks all over the world to different groups of people. And so I've asked this question to literally thousands of people. I've asked, when do you get your best ideas? When do you get your best ideas? And inevitably, the times that people get their best ideas are things like when they're in the shower, when they're out for a walk, when they're at the gym, when they're just falling off to sleep, when they're just waking up in the morning, when they're driving to and from work, when they're on holiday, when they get on a plane. That's what it is when they're when they're not thinking about the thing they've been trying to figure out. So another sense I have of the word clarity is that it's an unsuspected inner resource that every single human being has, an innate capacity for clarity, for resilience, for realization, for transformation, and it's there in everybody. And so it's got to the point where in my work, it's become so evident to me that that's there with everybody, that when I'm working with an individual or when I'm working with a group, my aim is just to create the conditions for them to have those realizations and insights from within themselves. Because what I found again and again and again, Will, is that as you have those realizations, it gives you what you need in your life. And I've put it to the test in all kinds of different scenarios. I did a keynote just a couple of weeks ago at the NATO Defense College in Rome. So I flew out. There was my first live in-person engagement in quite some time because of all the nonsense that's been going on. But what I was pointing to is that capacity for clarity is there in military leaders, just as it is in business people, just as it is in the people I coach one-to-one on an individual basis. It's there in everyone. So that's kind of my message, if you like, is that every single one of us has that innate source of clarity, resilience, and well-being. It's there in all of us. It's an innate source of confidence and high performance and all that sort of stuff. And you just need to know where to look.
And I think that this is a really apt time for people to be learning the process of clarity, because the last 2 years is like having a snow globe, and it's shaken everything up, and people are like, well, I don't know where I'm going now. I don't know what's going on. I've realized that actually the career that I thought I wanted, I no longer want, or because of the amount of time they spent with the partner that they were with, they no longer want. So finding that clarity is really important. What I find fascinating, and I know many of our listeners always find the stories incredibly inspirational, is what was it that's led you to this point? I mean, what's the Jamie Smart story of getting to this point of sharing your methodology of clarity with the world?
Well, it goes right back, actually, because when I was a little kid, I used to experience huge amounts of stress. And then when I was about 12, I found a solution, which was drinking alcohol. And it worked great. It was like, oh man, where have you been all my life? And so during my teens and my 20s, I tried to get better at it because I wasn't very good at drinking. I mean, I could drink a lot, but I'd get, in all kinds of trouble. So I just kept trying to get better at it. And then when I was in my 30s, my early 30s, had been recently married, and my wife was about to leave because of my drinking. I said, don't worry, babe, I'll stop drinking. And so I ended up going into recovery. And what I found was that the work I could do when I was drinking, which was I used to run, multi-million pound organizational change programs and software programs and that sort of thing. I couldn't really do it sober. It just that my heart was wanting something else. And I kind of had this idea that there was something here that I was, would love doing, that I was born to do, that I was meant to do, but I didn't know what it was. And I was certain if I could just figure out what it was, that I would do it. And so I started trying to figure out what it was. And I went on a training program. This is like in 1998, so like 23 years ago. Went on a 2-day training program. And it was an influence skills course. And it was based in something called neurolinguistic programming, NLP. And I had 2 insights that weekend. Now, I didn't know they were insights, but my first insight was, oh, you can do whatever you put your mind to. At least you can have a go at it. Like, well, up till that point, and I expect a lot of your listeners will relate to this. Up till that point, I kind of felt like I'd just fallen into the life I had, and it was there later, and I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, even though it was just I was good at it, and I'd somehow fallen into it, but I didn't feel like I was choosing it. And what I suddenly saw was, oh, you've been co-creating the life that you're living. You've had a much more active role in creating this life that doesn't quite fit you than you may have suspected till now. So I was like, oh, you can do whatever you want to. Like you can try, like there's no rules on that basis. That was the first insight. Second insight, I suddenly realized, oh, I want to do that. I saw this guy basically working with groups and coaching people and that sort of thing. I was like, I want to do that. That looks cool. So literally 2 weeks later, I handed in my notice at my job and I started on this journey. I started a company called Salad, which was an NLP company. I retrained as an NLP trainer and as a NLP practitioner. I was fascinated with that work, fascinated with how people change and all that sort of stuff. So I built a company called Salad, and that was very successful. And then
I'm going to jump in there just because you're being very humble, but Salad was the largest NLP product business in the world. I'm right in saying at the time. So you're being very humble and modest about it, but you grew something. I mean, the NLP movement is huge. I first come across NLP myself 14 years ago, and we've run our own NLP training certifications, practitioner, master practitioner, and whatnot. But yeah, I just want to make sure that we sort of acknowledge that for what it was, because it was pretty. I've got Salad cards somewhere in the office or at home. I'm pretty sure I've still got the app on my phone as well. It was a great little resource for sure.
Yeah, well, and it was a great journey. I got to say, well, I loved doing it. We grew an enormous community of people that we were working with and who were using our products, and it was stuff I was really passionate about, and I loved doing it. And then what happened was something wasn't quite right, and I didn't know what it was. Something was kind of off. Not with the business. The business was fine, but I felt like somehow I wasn't on purpose. I wasn't living my truth, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I read 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. And he said, well, you need to be having mini adventures, taking mini retirements and going off for 3 months. So I thought, that's it. And I went on a 3-month ski holiday, got my business running on autopilot, went on a 3-month ski holiday to Whistler in Canada. And my idea was that once I was there, I could become awesome at skiing and have a great time, and I would be super successful because I was like living the dream according to the rules of my industry. But 6 weeks in, and I was miserable and I was off track, and I couldn't figure out why it was, because I had everything that I had thought was going to give me a beautiful life, and I wasn't happy. So I had to go back to the drawing board. And in the process of going back to the drawing board, I came across this obscure work by a guy called Sydney Banks. And I started having insights into his work. And the first insight I had was, oh, everything you've been looking for outside of you is already there within you. Now, obviously not cool shoes and fancy wristwatches and stuff, but the experiences of fulfillment and clarity of wisdom, of well-being, of love and connection. Everything that I'd been looking for in accomplishment and success and money and all that sort of, it's actually already there within you. So that immediately reorganized my priorities, right? Second insight I had was the one I started out talking about. I suddenly realized, oh, the fact that a person can even see or hear or feel or perceive means you have that innate capacity for clarity and resilience and well-being already there within you. Now, I'd read that, right? Like I'd read that everyone's already got the resources they need and that it's an inside job and that sort of thing. But I went from knowing it intellectually to knowing it like you know your own name. And that immediately started reorganizing the way I worked with my clients, and immediately started transforming the kind of results that I got with my clients. Like I saw my coaching results go through the roof once I knew, because you got to imagine, Will, speaking to you as a coach, all of a sudden your job gets a lot easier if you know that the thing that's going to do all the heavy lifting is already there within your client. It's just a game changer. So that changed that. Then in June, and this will bring us up to the present date, in June of that year, June 2009, so I'd been exploring this obscure stuff for about 6 months. And I suddenly realized, oh, this is principles. These are principles for the field of psychology. This understanding is to psychology what the discovery of germs was to medicine. And I literally called up my office that day. I said, we're changing direction. There's principles for the field. Hold on to your hats. And it's been a wild ride ever since. My book Clarity became a #1 bestseller. Then my book Results became a Sunday Times bestseller. People had been saying to me for years, you should write books, but it didn't make sense to until I knew. And then once I was working with this stuff, I knew I had to get it out to a wider audience, because what I saw, Will, was that I imagined a world where everyone on the planet already knew about their innate capacity for clarity, resilience, well-being, transformation, success, all that stuff. If people already know that, then I'd be out of a job. But boy, what a great world it would be to live in, because, you know, as we sit here today at this end of, you know, a very weird couple of years in the world, it seems to me that there's a mental health crisis going on in the world. Our clarity and attention is under attack by everything from, you know, mobile phones and social media to, you know, artificial intelligences that are basically highly motivated to suck our attention away from the moment and away from our lives and away from the beauty and wisdom that's there within everyone. So my fundamental assertion, and then I'm going to shut up, is that every single person on this planet, everyone listening to this, has a source of wisdom at the heart of their being. And it's so available that it can come to you when you're doing something as simple as having a shower or out for a walk. Yeah. And my mission, if you like, is to wake people up to that and help them awaken others.
And that's exactly what we're going to be doing today, is talking about that. And you spoke about sort of things being sucked away from you, but a lot of the work in order to get that clarity, most people think, right, I want more happiness, more love, more money, more houses, wristwatches, you name it, right? I want more. So therefore I need to do more. But a lot of the work that you do is actually around sort of subtractive psychology, and that it's the subtraction that leads to the happiness, the fulfillment, and the success. So do you want to explain a little bit more about the subtraction?
Yeah, absolutely. And first I should say, like in the world of stuff, right? Some things are very receptive to action and doing. So for instance, I love being strong. So I have a weight room in my garage, and I go out and lift weights because I can't think myself into being strong. I got to put my muscles under that pressure. And similarly, like if I want to, you know, I don't know, if I wanted to build something, then it's going to require action. But we assume that the same principles that apply in the physical world apply it in our psychological world, and they actually don't. Like, I'll tell you a quick story. I was working with a client. I do this, a lot of my clients are, especially my one-to-one clients, are entrepreneurs, business owners, CEOs. And so when we're working together, we start with what I call a 3-day intensive, and we basically get together for 3 days, completely unplugged from business and work, and spend 3 days just diving into this understanding. So I'm doing one of these sessions, and the idea is to get people really deeply connected to that source of clarity and wisdom and well-being that's there within them. So I'm doing this with a business owner. He's got, a multi-million-pound business, and he's hired me to help him get clarity in his business, clarity in his relationships, clarity in his life, basically. So we're about, I don't know, 40 minutes into the first session, and he suddenly gets kind of a bit freaked out. I guess because it suddenly occurred to him that he's paid a ton of money to come and sit in a room with me for 3 days. And he gets a bit freaked out, and he goes, Jamie, we're going to need a formula. I'm going to need a formula for how this is going to work. Well, I suddenly get a bit freaked out because I haven't brought a formula, and I'm kind of like, oh God, I'm going to have to tell him I haven't got one. I'm going to have to refund him his money. I'm going to have to, get a bad reputation, all this. Then it suddenly occurs to me, where do you believe your experience is coming from? And like in that moment, it had genuinely looked to me like my experience of freak out was letting me know about my client and my lack of a formula and the implications of this. And it suddenly hits me. It's like, oh no, you're feeling the moment. You're feeling what's going on in your psychology in this moment and nothing else. It's an inside job. This is something figured out by a guy called Hermann Helmholtz back in the 1850s. He's like the grandfather of neurology. He discovered that our experience of an external world, external in time and space, is actually being created via induction from our nerves. It's like we get information from our senses, and then we take a guess at what's going on. So it suddenly occurs to me, oh no, you're feeling the moment. So the moment I saw that, I got relief. I'm like, oh, good. And the moment I fell out of my own nervousness or whatever and back into the present moment, it came to me. I said, here's the formula. I said, you plus a misunderstanding equals stuck. That's it. You've had a misunderstanding about who you really are and how life works. And that's had you stuck in your thinking around work, around business, around relationships, around your life, all this stuff. He goes, oh, I like it. I said, it gets better. I said, you minus a misunderstanding equals clarity, spontaneity, creativity, resilience, well-being, enjoyment, fulfillment, all the things you've been looking for. And he's like, great, let's go. Now, here's the interesting thing. The clarity model is ruthlessly subtractive. It basically says that clarity, you have an innate capacity for wisdom, well-being, clarity, all that stuff. It's built in. You've already got it. Just like you don't have to practice having kidneys. They're built in. You don't have to practice having that source of clarity within you. It's already there. You have that capacity. The only thing that gets in the way of it is what I call contaminated thinking arising from the mistaken, a simple misunderstanding about who we are and how our experience is created. And so kind of my job, if you like, Will, is to help remove that contamination so people can wake up to the clarity that's already there, but also to teach a simple understanding that has you going there automatically. So you're automatically noticing when you're off track and finding your way back to that source of clarity that's already there within you. So it's ruthlessly subtractive. I'll throw in one extra bit that I just found was fascinating. I read a thread the other day, which is a post about Elon Musk's 5-step process to rocket design, right? Like to design in general, in fact. And I think it's the second step is subtract, discard the things he said, because if you're not subtracting from the process, there's too much stuff in there that isn't useful. So you got to be subtracting. And that's how I see this. This is, if you look at it, the funny thing is it plays out across all different industries as well. If you look at the best traders, like the most, the billionaire investors, like the Stan Druckenmillers and that sort of thing, They get that way by not losing money. It's
Mhm.
the number one trading strategy is don't lose money. If you look at the best snooker players, the best tennis players, they win. They like my favorite snooker player of all time is Jimmy White, the best snooker player never to win, you know, the big times, the world championships, because he made mistakes. The best snooker players win by not making mistakes. Like they're also
Mm.
super talented, right? But it's what they're not making mistakes. So excellence is subtractive. And we kind of instinctively know that, but we live in a world where our conscious minds are suckered in by 5 top tips or the 6 secrets to having a swimsuit body or the 5 keys to wealth or that sort of thing. We go, oh yeah, but actually that's not how the pros do it. The pros win through subtraction.
Love that. I remember when I first read Clarity, must have been 4 years ago now, and you'll have to forgive me. There was a formula in it which was to do with subtraction, and I'm pretty sure it was to do with contaminated thinking. I was racking my brains before this as I was doing my sort of pre-interview notes, and the one that comes to my mind, this may have been it, it may not have been it, but I'm going to say it, and then if it's not, please correct me to your version of it. But I had peak performance equals potential minus interference. Now but that might have been yours, it might not, and if it wasn't, then please correct me to the one that you had that was some sort of formula.
It's actually close to that. So that, if I remember correctly, that's a performance formula that was from the inner game of tennis or the inner game of golf.
Yes, that
The
may have been it,
clarity
yeah.
equation is similar, but it's more generalized. So the clarity equation is clarity equals capacity minus contamination. So it
That's
starts
it.
from the
Yeah, yeah.
basis that you have this innate capacity. And this is huge. Like if you think about happiness and well-being, happiness and well-being is so simple. A newborn baby can do it. You know, you look at little children, and while they spend a certain amount of their time crying or raging or this type of thing, they spend a bunch of their time happy, curious, engaged, having fun, loving, enjoying life, all that sort of stuff. And it's my assertion, Will, that the reason a baby can do it without having been on a course, without having read any books about it, without having an app to help them be happy, is because it's a pre-existing capacity. It's built in, it's already there. And the only thing you need in order to benefit from and experience more of a pre-existing capacity is to understand how it works and to understand what gets in the way. So if you use the metaphor of a snow globe, if you think of a snow globe, if you shake up a snow globe, there's nothing you can do to clear the water, but all you need to do is stop shaking it, and the snow settles, and then clarity emerges, because clarity is the water's natural state. Well, my assertion is that clarity is your mind's natural state. And the thing that shakes it up is confusion about who we are and how our experience is created. So the way that shows up is worrying about the future, or worrying about the past, or trying to figure out what someone else is thinking or what I should be doing, or it's what I call preoccupation. We get preoccupied by stuff rather than available to the richness and intelligence of the moment. But here's the thing. Wisdom is also an innate capacity. And everyone, you ask yourself, when do you get your best ideas? And what I can guarantee is it's going to be the times when you're not preoccupied with the thing that you need ideas about. And I've even had people say, oh, well, no, I get my best ideas when I'm really, really thinking hard about it and really, really working hard on it. I'm like, okay, well, I'll play, walk me through it. How does it work? They go, I'm really working hard on it, and I'm reading lots of stuff, and I'm trying to figure it out. And then what happens? It's like, I'll finally go, oh man, I need a break. And I go and I go for a walk or something. And then it comes to me. It's like, yeah, it's so reliable. There's a book by William Duggan called Strategic Intuition. He has the chair for business management, I think, at Columbia University, might be Stanford. But he looked at this in all kinds of different walks of life, everything from the guys who created Netflix to Napoleon, who was Napoleon, when he was planning for a battle, he would spend days poring over maps of the territory and reading accounts of battles through history and doing research on the other commanders. And then he'd take some time off and he'd go for a walk or he'd go out to the bar or whatever. And he'd wait for what he called a strike of the eye. He'd wait until, and he would suddenly see, he would get clarity over what it was that he was going to do, what his unique and innovative approach was going to be. Well, it's the same if you look at the story of, Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or any of these guys who have created incredible businesses. They're leveraging an innate capacity for insight and realization.
Love it. And we've mentioned a lot of sort of business people and probably because the nature of the people that you and I both work with, but I remember there was and we talk about ideas and people having ideas, but even like the Liverpool player Daniel Sturridge was sort of read your book, scored a very important hat trick, so it's not just the ideas that necessarily having, it's the performance element of what clarity can bring, right?
It's really, really powerful. It's funny. Yeah, the Daniel Sturridge story was great. He'd been on a kind of a dry spell, and then he broke his dry streak with a hat trick. And when he came into his post-match interview, he had a copy of my book in his hand, and he said they were asking him about the pressure he must be under, and he said, "I don't experience pressure anymore because the experience of pressure is mind-made." It's like even, and you've probably seen it with all the people you've worked with. Well, you'll see one person who's, running a tiny business and they're feeling under incredible pressure. And then someone who's, running a business 100 times as large, who's just more available to the moment and not feeling that same pressure. Well, it's because the pressure is mind-made. You'll meet someone else who's running a similarly huge business and they're out of their mind with pressure and can't keep it together. Like, it's mind-made. It's an internally generated. It absolutely looks like it's coming from outside, but it's internally generated. And a lot of people actually know this intuitively. I was reading an interview with Usain Bolt, and he was, I don't know if this was when he was the fastest man on earth. And the interviewer saw him warming up before a race, except all the other people who were racing were running through pre-race routines in their head and imagining themselves having victory and doing all these routines and exercises and rituals to win the race. And Usain Bolt, to warm up, was basically high-fiving the crowd and talking to people and that sort of stuff. And the reporter said, "Why weren't you doing your pre-race routines? Why weren't you preparing for the race?" And Usain Bolt said, "Well, I find that if I think too much about a race, I don't run that well. But if I connect with people and just enjoy myself and that sort of stuff, I seem to run great." Well, he intuitively knows that there's a link between clarity of mind and high performance. Like where it counts, he's running, the 100 meters in a heartbeat. He knew that to run his best race, he needs to have that mental clarity.
Yeah, I love that. So one of the things that I'm really curious to ask is that you went from sort of your first moment of insight, the first 2 moments of insight, immerse yourself in NLP, and then when you stumbled across the Principles Works and Sydney Banks, you then sort of moved away from NLP. So what was it that you then realized, having known about the principles, that wasn't aligned with NLP or shifted your thought process to maybe not believe in that as a model to operate from? So what was that key shift?
Well, that makes sense to explain it is, and I loved NLP. I found it fascinating. The decade I spent learning and teaching NLP was some of the most wonderful time of my life. I really, really enjoyed it. And NLP as a field is, so you got to understand, the field of psychology as a whole is a pre-principles field. There are no kind of bedrock principles. Like if you look at something like physics, we've got Newton's laws, we've got, the quantum equations. it's a very scientifically validated field. Like the fact that we can even use mobile phones and that sort of thing is because or that we can go up in an airplane and it be safe to go up in, is because the field of physics has a really strong foundational basis grounded in reality. And so then engineering, whether it's engineering a plane or a computer or a bridge or a car or a tower block, engineering is leveraging those bedrock facts about reality, okay? So it's a very scientifically validated field. The field of psychology is not a scientifically validated field in that way. There aren't a set of bedrock facts that the field agrees on. And so it's what's referred to as a pre-principles field. It's the field of psychology is in its pre-paradigm stage, right? Like physics was before Newton or chemistry was before Lavoisier, okay? So what you have in the field of psychology is hundreds of different schools of personality, Freudian, Jungian, all these schools of personality, all sorts of different models. There are like 850 different schools of talk therapy. And what NLP did was they came along and said, well, look, given that there's no bedrock facts, let's develop heuristics. Let's develop rules of thumb that a skilled practitioner can use with a decent anticipation of getting a good result. So that was amazing for the field, right? They come across with stuff you can learn and do that can cure phobias and can, sort out, eating disorders, all kinds of things. And with a reasonably good chance of working. There's nothing in NLP that gets the same predictable result 100% of the time, but you get a skill set for working with those heuristics. And in the absence of bedrock principles, that looked to me like a pretty damn good thing to be working with, right? So I worked with it for a decade. I loved it, having great results. Then I stumble across bedrock principles. Well, that's like, if you imagine having spent your whole life doing engineering and then someone shows you physics, it's like, oh, okay, with the physics, you're going to be a better engineer. So what I saw was that the impact that learning these principles had in my own life was more profound and generalized and life-changing than all the NLP I'd done, which I'd done for myself and all the impact I'd had for myself. So I'm like, whoa, this is big. Then I started using it with my own clients and I saw that the breakthroughs they had were enormous. Now, that's not to say it's a replacement for NLP. It's a different thing. And so I'll still take students who have a deep understanding of these principles, and I'll teach them some of the distinctions that I'm working with that I learned from NLP, right? Like, it's not like those distinctions no longer work, but in a field where where there's no awareness of bedrock principles, the heuristics are fantastic. But once you know the bedrock principles, everything works better. I'll give you an example. When I went to, I did that talk I mentioned at the NATO Defense College. I went in there, I didn't know what kind of reception I was going to get, right? Because what I was told was that the military staff, they found the earlier parts of the day, the military strategy pieces of the day and that sort of thing very interesting. But the stuff I was doing, they wouldn't be interested in it. So my challenge for the day was, how can I get these guys interested in this? And as I thought about it, I thought, well, if they're going to be interested, they're going to need to see something for themselves. And so I'm like, okay, well, how can I create my talk to give them the best chance of realizing something for themselves from within? Because I know if they realize that, that's going to have more impact than any concept or idea or tip or 5-step sequence or any, like, we in the days of the information revolution that we're living through, you can't go through a day without being offered 10 different sets of 5 tips for everything from 6-pack abs to red hot sex to the to make your fortune, whatever. And we read those 5 tips and it appeals to our intellect, it appeals to our conscious mind. but then we don't action them, because it turns out the thing that is going to actually result in real action and real difference is going to be you seeing something differently, something that you realize for yourself. So that's what I did with these military folks. I just created the conditions for them to realize something for themselves, and it went over really well. So it's super, super practical.
So I know that people right now, they're going to be thinking, we heard the principles, bedrock principles. What are the principles?
Got it. Well, when I talk about the principles behind clarity, what I'm talking about is your innate capacity for realization, resilience, transformation, that sort of stuff. Now, I have two things that I work with, the two things that I believe that are the most important things that a person can discover. The first is how your experience is being created. Like, I give you an example of this, actually. You know how little kids often have like teddy bears or security blankets or that sort of thing? And it genuinely seems to the kid like they hold the teddy bear, the security blanket, and it gives them a feeling of security and well-being and comfort. And if they forget it, you know, because you're on holiday and you leave it in a hotel or something, the kid freaks out. And it genuinely seems to them like their freak out is coming from the lack of a teddy bear. But as adults, we know that 100% of that sense of comfort and security and well-being is coming from within the child. It isn't coming from within the teddy bear. It's coming, or the blanket or whatever. It's coming from within the child. Just like when they forget it at a hotel and they're freaking out, that feeling of freak out, that experience of freak out is coming from within the child. It's not coming from a teddy bear deficiency. But it genuinely seems to the child like it's coming from the bear or the blanket or whatever. So we know that as adults, that it's an internally generated phenomenon, right? But then as adults, we think it's different when it comes to the adult teddy bears of jobs or bank account balances or partners or health, or all the things where it can genuinely seem like our experience is coming from somewhere other than our own psychology. So what I'm going to suggest is that that's the first most valuable thing a person can discover for themselves, is to realize that their moment-to-moment experience is being created from within. Now, I'm not saying we don't live in a physical world, right? Like if I'm going somewhere in my car, I put my seatbelt on, I don't run with scissors or pet strange dogs. We still live in a physical world, but our felt experience of that world is being generated from within. And we often overlook that fact, and we attribute it to something out there in space and time. And when we do that, we get freaked out. Or we do that, we get attached or goal seeking or craving. So that's the first, what I'm calling a fact that people can discover that makes a difference to them is that. Go ahead.
So is that essentially sort of one of the things that I always try and do is take complex subjects and simplify them down into my really simple brain and understand it. My understanding of what you're saying there is that it's not the external situation or whatever it may be, it's your belief about the situation. So it's essentially the belief, whatever you have, like the
I go even further, Will. I go even further, Will. It's your embodied understanding of the reality of the situation. I'll give you a great example. I was working with a client who had extreme anxiety. It was so bad, it'd been going on for years. It was messing with his work and his relationships and everything. It was like a ball of fear in his stomach. And he said to me, the first session, he says to me, I know I shouldn't be overthinking it like this, but I can't help it. I said, no, you should be overthinking. He's like, what? I said, yeah, you should be overthinking. He's like, what do you mean? I said, well, have you ever had that thing where you're walking through your house or your apartment late at night and it's dark and you catch sight of something out of the corner of your eye and you think it's an intruder and you freak out, and then it turns out to be like a lampshade or a pile of clothes or a coat on the back of the door or whatever? He's like, yeah, I had that the other day. He said, I was in my office and I thought there was an intruder, but it was just an ironing board leaning against the banister. I said, right. Now, what happened when you thought there was an intruder? He said, well, my heart was racing. I was terrified. I was freaking out. I was in fight or flight. I said, right. What happened the moment you realized it was an ironing board? He said, oh, relief, relief. I said, now, how did you get from one to the other? He said, well, I didn't. I just realized that it was an ironing board. Well, here's the thing, Will. Our system is, we all have an embodied understanding of reality, and it's been at least good enough to get you this far in life. And it looks real. It's what looks real to you. And that capacity for insight and realization is our ability to bring our embodied understanding more closely into alignment with the facts of reality. And so, yeah, we're going to feel whatever we feel based on our embodied understanding of reality, whether that's right or not. And my assertion is that people are caught up in a false belief about where their experience comes from. So to your example, we're going to feel whatever we feel in accordance with our beliefs about the world, whether they're true or not. You know, if someone believes that the world is flat, then they're going to be very nervous about going for long walks because they might fall off the edge, regardless of the truth of the matter. So the most useful thing we could do for such a person is bring their understanding of reality closer to actual reality.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, and like you say, you talk about the sciences, and you go into the work by sort of Dr. Bruce Lipton and the biology of belief, and how the belief literally is ingrained at a cellular level. One of the big things that I had years ago, which at the time for me, I was like, it doesn't make any sense. But then one day it dawned on me, was people were saying to me how you can have belief systems carry over through generations, and I was like,
sure.
what a load of rubbish. When you're born, you come through, you're the blank canvas, and I was like, that's ridiculous. And then one day it just dawned on me. I was looking at someone, and it was a parent and child, and I just thought, oh my God, they look just like their parents. Why do they look like their parents? Well, they look like their parents because of the cells that have transfer from their parent to them, and if that cell has the blueprint to make them look like each other, then of course then it has the ability to have the a similar belief pattern sort of move from the parent to the sibling, and take it on and embody it and use it in that respect. So sometimes these belief systems, and your client you mentioned that had the anxiety, that could have been going on for generations and generations, but it's when they have the realization, not only are they having the realization to benefit themselves, but their family and their future family and a whole host of other people as a result, by them having this realization.
You got it, man. You got it. And while we can speculate about the mechanisms that allow, beliefs and fears and that sort of thing to pass from parent to child, it seems undeniable that there's some way that that's happening. So yeah, absolutely.
Love that. So you said that there was two sort of key principles.
Yeah.
There was the first, which we've explained at depth, and then the second.
So the first one is, where your experience is coming from. The second one, and then I'll explain what the three principles are, but this is my kind of simplified way of working with it. The second one is about who you really are. Like well, it's kind of interesting actually. So my girlfriend has a little dog called Jack, and when it gets dark at night, Jack can see his reflection in the mirror in the French windows. And when he catches sight of his reflection, he goes running towards the windows at high speed, barking, launches himself into the air and smacks into the windows and falls to the floor, right? And for the first year that was happening on a nightly basis, I would laugh and I'd be like, that dumb dog doesn't realize that that's him in the mirror, right? But then one day I realized something, which was, this will sound kind of way out, but that's not him in the mirror. That's a reflection. And while I recognize that reflection as a reflection of him, because it's actually what he looks like from 20 feet away or 3 feet away. But that's not who he is to himself. Now, they did these experiments with little children, like up to 6 or 7 months old. What they would do is they would sit the child in front of a mirror, looking at the mirror. Then they would put a curtain over the mirror and they would put a mark on the child's face. Then they would lift the curtain up again. And at 1 month, the curtain goes up and the child is totally non-reactive. Same at 2 months, same at 3 months, same at 4 months, same at 5 months. At 6 months, they lift up the curtain and the child goes. So by 6 months, they've learned to identify with that image of themselves. Now, Will, we're on Zoom here, so you and I can each see each other up on the screen. And I bet if I bumped into you in the street, I'd be able to go, oh, that's Will, that is, I recognize him. But actually, as you look at that image of yourself, an image, basically a mirror image, that's a third person perspective on you from a few feet away, okay? And you learned to identify yourself with that image of yourself. You learned to be able to look at that image and go, oh yeah, that's me. And that self-image has had connected to it all kinds of beliefs and ideas about yourself and about the world and about what you can do and what you can't do and what your qualities are and what your frailties are. And that image of self is you could say it's an accumulation of ideas and sensory fragments and that sort of thing that's built up over decades. But it's my assertion to you that that's not who you really are, that who you really are is the you that you are to yourself from 0 millimeters away, the you that you were born being. And that you is intimately connected to that source of resilience and well-being and clarity and all that sort of stuff. And that you is who you really are. Now, it's really useful to have a self-image. It lets you know whose shoes to tie and whose teeth to brush and where the edge of your body starts and the rest of the world begins. So it's very, very practical to have a self-image. But the Buddhists talk about the face you were born with. And the face you were born with is like who you are to yourself. And so many of us have been taught to identify with that image of self from a few feet away rather than with who we really are. And so you see this great yearning in the world for people to come back to themselves, that authenticity, that sense of themselves. And so many of us, like the client I mentioned, who'd, I said, you plus a misunderstanding equals stuck. He'd built up all these ideas of himself, but none of them were who he really is. And so the reason, funnily enough, I do my 3-day intensives with one-to-one clients is so we can kind of peel back the layers and help reacquaint them with who they really are, like with their true self. Because the more we're in touch with who we really are, the more we know what's the right next step for us, the more we're in tune with our wisdom, the more we're able to see the way forward, the more we're able to get clarity. So what I've found in my work and what I kind of confine my work to is those two. I use those two beliefs, if you like. I believe that the two most valuable things a person can discover are how experience is created and who they really are. Because what I find is if I just use those two what I call truths to guide me, we find our way into a much more kind of organic, the paleo diet that people talk about, where it's like eating like we ate when we were cavemen. Well, this is what I think of subtractive psychology as, is kind of using that set of capacities that we used when we were cavemen before we had it overlaid with all these ideas about what we should be and how we should look and what we should do and all that sort of stuff. So that's how I approach these principles. The chap I mentioned earlier, Sydney Banks, he codified these the the principles as mind, thought, and consciousness. But mind, thought, and consciousness, they're not principles like most people think of principles. When you say to someone, you know, what are the principles behind something, people will usually be thinking of it in terms of like the principles to having a tidy room, or the principles to being principles to being well organized in your paperwork, which is only read something once, and that sort of thing. But that's principles in the sense of good ideas or steps. These are principles more like gravity as a principle. Like when Isaac Newton discovered the principle of gravity, he realized, this is already up and running. This is already going on. Like you and me and everyone listening was born into the principle of gravity, and we've grown up in it, right? And you can't do the principle of gravity or master the principle of gravity, but you can live in alignment with it. And if you live out of alignment with the principle of gravity, you're going to pay a price in bruises and bumps and that sort of thing. Well, it's the same with the principles behind clarity. They're already up and running, and you can ignore them. You can do whatever you like with them, but you're either going to be living in alignment with them, in which case life's going to be going one way, or you can be living out of alignment with them, in which case you're going to have challenges and struggles and that sort of thing.
And on that note, I think so. One of the things that personally I've become over the last more than 4 years, 5, 6 years, is I've become a lot more spiritual. Now, I don't believe in God in terms of a specific religion, the universe, the greater grand design, absolutely. But when I used to think of spirituality once upon a time, probably to do with how I was brought up, I pictured a grey-haired, grey-bearded man sat in a cloud somewhere, right? But then as I've grown older, I've realized, like, for me, the word spiritual is sort of like peace and harmony. You know, if I've got a high level of working on my spirituality, it's like, how at peace and harmony, like where am I sitting in terms of how peaceful am I, and how at harmony am I? And my understanding was sort of the Sydney Banks. Yes, there was the mind, thought, and consciousness, but it was sort of underlined as the spiritual nature of functionality. And that being is like what you said, it's not principles as do this, do this, do this. It's like, it's a way of being that is the most effective way of being at peace and harmony.
Yeah, well, I go even further. Well, it's something that you can understand, and it's going to give you what you need when you need it. So I'll give you an example. If a fireman is going to rush into a burning building to save someone's life, he needs clarity. He doesn't necessarily need peace and harmony in that moment. He needs to be on his game. Whereas if I'm on holiday with my girlfriend, the more peace and harmony I can get, the better. If I'm coaching someone on how to grow their business, and we're looking at, what's going to be the right way forward, we want to find the business path for them that's going to have them enjoying their business and going to have them energized and all that sort of stuff. They're also going to want like the creative, innovative ideas that are going to get them the kind of vision for their business that they want and that sort of thing. So it seems to me that peace and harmony, for instance, are examples of kind of different manifestations of an idealized state. So that idealized state might in some domains be peace and harmony, in other domains be clarity and precision, in other domains be love and connection, in other domains might be creativity and well-being, in other domains, like if you ever saw the movie Touching the Void, incredible film about two mountain climbers, one of whom is a documentary, incredible story. Basically, one of these guys ended up hanging off the edge of a glacier for many, many hours, and then his rope cut and he fell into this glacier. And it's the story of him coming down. But that's a story of clarity. Like he discovered that when he was, lying under this glacier with broken bones and the whole 9 yards, that there was an unsuspected him inside of him that got him out of that and got him to safety and got him to well-being. So what I want to suggest is that while I since coming across this understanding, I've had a massive increase in the amount of peace and harmony I experience in my life. I've also had a massive increase in the amount of love and connection I experience. Also a massive increase in the amount of courage I experience. So it looks to me like it's a gateway to the domain of all the kind of what we might call idealized drivers, like motivation and confidence and courage and clarity and presence and all of those. So it's while it gives you access to peace and harmony, it also gives you access to the stuff that helps you get shit done.
Yeah, love it. One final question before we learn how people can find out more about you and what you're up to. Most people have experienced that in the shower moment of the idea, or the running down by the river and the idea, or whatever it is that they're doing where they're having their ideas, you know. With what you understand and what you've learned and what you've studied, do you have the ability to call on that on demand now?
Yes and no. So I, like everyone else, I have times when my head's up my backside. And the thing in those times that is so valuable to me is while I can be completely lost, I know that I'm just lost in my head. You're not gonna have me thinking that it's like genuinely betting my money on it's because it's coming from outside of me. So that's really, really valuable. But what I found is, and you know, I've been exploring this for over a decade. Some people wake up to it really, really fast, others take longer. But what I found is the more deeply you understand it, the less time you spend with your head up your bum, and the more quickly you self-correct when you do lose your bearings. And so here's the other thing that's kind of interesting. I can't do it like that, but I can count on it. So I'll tell you a quick story to wrap up. When I was launching my first book, Clarity, I got called on Sky Sports Breaking News to comment on something. Andrew Strauss was, they thought he was going to retire as England captain, right? So I got called up to go on Sky Breaking News. And I was shitting myself. I'd never been on, breaking news before. I was going out live to 5.5 million people. So like, I kind of didn't want to do it, right? Like, cause I was scared, but I was like, no, courage. So I did it, So they took me to the studios and I'm there in the green room and I'm pacing up and down, feeling super nervous, like uncomfortably nervous, like sweaty palms and shaking and the whole 9 yards. And there's another guy in the green room with me and he's like, how you doing? I'm like, not so good. He's like, and this guy was a salty dog, he'd been on TV 1 million times or whatever. He goes, well, what are you going to do about it? I said, nothing. He's like, well, how's that going to work? I said, well, I don't need to do anything about it right now. I'm in the green room with you. I don't need to be in a good space. I need to be present and available and able to listen and able to answer questions well once I'm on air. He goes, well, how are you going to do that? I said, well, your mind's a self-correcting system. All I need to do is leave it alone. And I trust that I'll have what I need when I need it. So he's like, good luck with that, pal. But I went out on air and sure enough, I sat down. I'm like, okay, what do I know to do? I'll listen to the interviewer. I'll listen to the interviewer and see what happens. So they asked me the first question and I'm off to the races. Well, this is what you'll find is that as you continue exploring it, you'll discover that you can count on it. And if you know you can count on it, then you don't need to have it ready in advance. Like I know I can count on it when I need it.
Amazing. Lovely. Thank you very much, Jamie. Always absolutely amazing to have you on the show and great to catch up and hear what you've been up to more recently. So if people have been listening to this, and which I'm sure many of them will, and go, this sounds incredible. I need to find out more about Jamie and his work and what he's up to. Where can people find out about you? What have you got coming up?
A couple of things. So first of all, you can find out about me either at my website, jamiesmart.com, or I'm in all the usual social channels. My handle is jamiesmart.com, so jamiesmart.com without the dot. I've got podcasts. My books, Clarity, Results, the Little Book of Clarity and the Little Book of Results are available on Amazon and on Audible if you prefer audiobooks. And then I've got a couple of programs that will be interesting to some people. For coaches and therapists and trainers, I've got a program called the Thriving Coaches Blueprint, which is specifically around how to get clients and grow your business and that sort of thing, but in a way that fits with who you are. Because what I notice, Will, is that a lot of coaches and therapists who are genuinely have something they want to share with the world and they're trying to grow their businesses, but they're trying to do it in someone else's way. They're trying to do it in a way that doesn't fit with who they are. So Thriving Coaches Blueprint is just a 12-week program to help take your coaching, therapy, consultancy, training business up to the next level in a relatively short period of time. So that we've got another one of those coming up before the end of the year. And then the other one is once a year, I run something called my Clarity Certification Training. And there's a real mix of people on that. We have people who are coaches, therapists, and trainers, but we also have entrepreneurs and business owners, often people who have read the books or listened to some of the podcasts and think, man, you got to get some of this in your life. So we've got a great mix of people. We run that once a year, and that's starting in January. So those are, if people want to take it deeper, that's a great way of doing it.
And can they find out about all of those on jamiesmart.com?
Yeah, all of that's on the website.
Perfect. Well, what we'll do is for convenience, we'll put the link to the website in the show notes so people can just head to that and go and find out about it and whatnot. Jamie, thank you so much for joining me again for a conversation. First time on the podcast. Great to have you here. And for everyone that's been listening, I hope you found this beneficial. Go and I always feel weird saying go and follow Jamie. It always sounds like you've got stalkers. I'm not encouraging people to go and stalk you, but go and connect with Jamie on socials, his website, register for getting his mailing list, do those things. He's got some incredible insights and some fantastic wisdom. So yeah, Jamie, thank you once again. And for everyone that's been listening, until next time, make it happen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.